I eased my old Ford pickup to a stop at the end of the valley road, the tires crunching softly on the familiar gravel as the engine ticked itself cool. The early Colorado sun was just cresting the eastern ridge, spilling long golden light across the pines and turning the morning mist into something almost holy. I'd made this drive hundreds of times in the 5 years since I moved to Pine Valley, and it never failed to settle something deep inside me. But that morning, something was wrong. Dead wrong. Where my sturdy oak gate had stood the day before, built with my own hands, hung true and level, was now a deliberate mound of fresh gravel, piled high enough to block the entire easement road. And standing squarely in front of it, arms crossed tight as fence wire, chin lifted in that way she had, was Margaret Ellis. She looked like she'd been planted there hours ago, waiting for me to show up so she could deliver whatever speech she'd rehearsed. I sat in the cab a moment longer than necessary, letting the quiet sink in. At 62, I've learned not to rush into other people's storms. 35 years walking property lines as a county surveyor taught me that most disputes start hot and end cold if you give the facts time to do their work. But this felt different. Personal. I stepped out slowly, boots hitting the ground with the solid sound of a man who knows exactly where he stands. The air carried the sharp bite of pine sap and cold earth. Margaret started talking before I'd closed the truck door. "This access point has been temporarily restricted pending HOA review," she announced, voice carrying across the clearing like she was addressing a meeting. "New guidelines have been implemented to protect the ridge from overuse and environmental degradation. You'll need to submit a formal written request to the Architectural Committee for any future access." I walked toward her, hands loose at my sides, eyes moving past her to the post where my gate had hung. The heavy iron hinges were gone, bolts sheared clean off with a torch or a saw. No sign of the gate itself. Someone had come in the night and erased it. "Margaret," I said, keeping my tone even, the same tone I'd used 1,000 times calming angry landowners who thought a fence was 6 inches onto their side. "You and I both know this is a recorded easement. It's been here since 1928, long before your association was even a gleam in some developer's eye. You can't block a legal right-of-way with a pile of gravel and pretend it's temporary." Her eyes narrowed. "Community standards evolve, Richard. We have a responsibility to preserve what makes this place special. One person's convenience doesn't outweigh the greater good. One person's convenience." That's what she called my legal access to my own property. I looked at the gravel again. Fresh load, light gray, still sharp-edged. Delivered recently. The pile was shaped too neatly. Someone had taken time with a rake or a blade to make it look intentional, almost official. And there were no tire tracks leading away except the faint ones from whatever truck dumped it. Whoever helped her had been careful. I felt something tighten in my chest, not anger exactly. More like the slow recognition that this wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a declaration. I didn't argue further that morning. Just turned, walked back to my truck, and drove the long way around through the National Forest Road to reach my cabin. It added 40 minutes, but it gave me time to think. My name is Richard Harlan. I retired from the county surveyor's office 5 years ago and bought 20 acres down in the lower valley, good meadow, year-round creek, southern exposure. The kind of place a man can build a small cabin, keep a few tools, and let the days stretch out slow. But the real draw was the ridge above. Not tall by Rocky Mountain standards, but it split the properties like a natural spine, and the old ranch road, the easement, climbed gently up through it. I'd studied every plat, every deed, every survey note before I signed. That easement was solid, recorded when this whole valley was one big cattle operation. HOAs can police mailbox colors and satellite dishes, but they don't get to erase rights that predate them by decades. Basic property law. Something even first-year title officers understand. Margaret Ellis moved in about 10 years before I did. Retired school administrator from Denver, widowed, looking for community in the mountains. She'd risen quickly in the HOA ranks, secretary, then vice president, then de facto ruler. Folks let her because she was organized and loud, and most people just wanted to be left alone. But over time, she began treating the ridge like her personal kingdom, complaining about dust, about truck noise, about anything that reminded her she didn't own everything she could see from her deck. I'd stayed out of her way, nodded politely at meetings. Kept my place tidy. But when I started framing my cabin and using the easement daily, something shifted. She watched. She noted. And now she'd acted. The notes began the next morning. I found the first one taped to the old fence post near the blocked gate. Heavy white paper, folded once, smelling strongly of that cloying floral perfume she favored. Handwritten in careful, slanted cursive. Notice of access restriction. Per HOA Architectural Review Guidelines Section 4.2b, all non-emergency ridge access requires prior written approval. Submit Form AR-17 in triplicate to the committee. Failure to comply may result in daily assessments until resolved. No Section 4.2b existed. No Form AR-17. No signatures from any board member. Just Margaret's perfume and her certainty. I folded it carefully, slipped it into my shirt pocket, and kept walking the line, checking markers out of habit. The land felt the same. Cool dirt, pine needles, the faint sound of the creek far below, but the air carried a new weight. The notes kept coming. One every morning for a week. Tucked under rocks. Wedged into my mailbox. Pinned to the temporary orange fencing I'd put up around my build site. Each one more insistent. Fines threatened. Deadlines invented. Phrases like immediate enforcement action and escalation to legal counsel. She started talking to other neighbors too. I'd hear it secondhand, how I was planning major development, running heavy equipment, threatening the quiet we'd all moved here for. My old '98 Ford with the rust spots and the gentle idle suddenly became a menace in her telling. I kept every note. Photographed each one in place, dated them, filed them in a folder labeled simply Ella's correspondence. One evening, after finding a printed notice, this one actually typed, as if that made it more legitimate, threatening a $500 daily fine starting in 3 days. I spread all my documents across the rough-sawn pine table in my half-finished cabin. Lantern light flickered over century-old plats, aerial photos, the original ranch survey from 1928. The easement line ran clear and unbroken, marked in red ink that had barely faded. A man learns patience walking lines set by surveyors long dead. You find iron pins under decades of duff, stone monuments half swallowed by roots. You learn that recorded boundaries endure because they're based on measurement and law, not preference or volume. Margaret didn't respect that, or couldn't accept it. I drove into town the next day and sat down with Tom Bradley in his small office above the hardware store. Tom's been practicing rural property law since Nixon was president. Wears suspenders, drinks coffee strong enough to float a horseshoe. He read through my folder slowly, nodding now and then. She's committing several torts here, he said finally. Interference with easement, private nuisance, possibly trespass. Blocking a recorded right-of-way is serious business in this state. But people like Margaret don't stop because they're wrong, I replied. They stop when they run out of moves. Tom leaned back. Then let's start removing her moves. We drafted real letters that week. Certified mail. Copies of the 1928 plat, the easement language highlighted. Copies of Colorado statutes on recorded rights. Polite but firm. One to each board member individually, plus the association attorney. While Tom handled the legal mail, I stopped by the title company to see Sarah Jenkins. She'd closed my purchase and knew every parcel in the valley. Funny you should come in today, she said quietly, glancing around though we were alone. That big Upper Ridge parcel, the one that controls the whole access chain, just came available. Quiet listing. Owner's out in Arizona, wants it sold fast and clean. My pulse quickened. That parcel was the keystone. Owned it. And you own the practical control of the easement, even if the legal right remained shared. I made an offer that afternoon. Full asking price. Cash. No contingencies beyond clear title. The kind of offer that makes sellers sit up straight. They accepted by supper time. 3 days later, on a crisp morning with frost still clinging to the grass, the sheriff's department truck pulled up to the gravel pile. I'd filed a formal obstruction complaint. Simple form, clear statute cited. In rural counties, deputies don't mess around with blocked access. Margaret came hurrying down from her house in slippers and a robe, hair still in curlers, talking a mile a minute about community safety, environmental protection, and HOA authority. Deputy Ramirez, young, polite, but immovable, listened with the patience of a man who'd heard every excuse. When she wound down, he turned to me. "This your recorded easement, Mr. Harlan?" "Yes, sir." He walked the pile slowly, boots crunching, studying it like evidence. "Ma'am," he said to Margaret, "you cannot obstruct a legal right-of-way. This gravel comes down today, or we'll have it removed and bill the responsible party." The color drained from her face. Ramirez just waited. Silence can be powerful when it comes from a badge. She had no more words. The real thunder came the next morning. I was drinking coffee on my porch steps when my phone rang. "Tom, congratulations, Richard," he said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. "Deed recorded at 8:17 a.m. You now own the entire Upper Ridge parcel. Clean title. Done deal." I drove down to the site slowly, letting it settle. The gravel pile still sat there like a stubborn monument, but everything felt different now. Margaret was already there with 3 board members, all clutching coffee mugs and looking uncomfortable. When I stepped out and told them, quietly, no gloating, Margaret actually staggered back a step. "You can't just buy your way out of community obligations," she sputtered. "Already did," I said. "It's recorded. Same county office that recorded the easement you tried to block." One board member, Bill Blanchard, a retired engineer who'd always seemed reasonable, took an actual physical step away from Margaret. The others followed suit without thinking. "We'll need to review this new development," Bill muttered, eyes on the ground. They left soon after, tires spinning slightly on the loose gravel as they hurried away. Margaret stood alone in front of her pile, looking suddenly small against the mountain she'd tried to rule. The cleanup began the very next day. An HOA truck arrived at dawn. 2 workers, a skid steer, and a dump truck. No speeches, no clipboards. They just started loading gravel. Load after load hauled away until the road lay clear again. They even brought in a grader and smoothed the surface, fixing ruts that had been there for years. Later that afternoon, the association president, Harold Jenkins, no relation to Sarah, came by in person, hat literally in hand. "We've refunded the assessments Mrs. Ellis referenced," he said quietly, handing over an envelope. "And we're updating our policy manuals to reflect reality." I nodded. Didn't rub it in. Some lessons stick better when you let silence do the teaching. That weekend, I built a new gate. Heavy white oak again, but thicker posts, stronger hinges, a latch that closes with a satisfying thunk. It swings true and silent now. I still see Margaret sometimes, walking her little spaniel along the lower road. She keeps to the far side, eyes down, steps hurried. We don't speak. Some bridges, once burned, aren't worth rebuilding. The valley has returned to itself. Mornings are quiet again. The creek sings the same song it's sung for a century. My coffee tastes better on the porch. And when I walk the ridge, my ridge now, I walk it with the deep satisfaction of a man who defended what was his without ever raising his voice. Margaret thought proximity gave her rights. Thought persistence could rewrite recorded truth. Thought that if she pushed hard enough, others would fold. She learned different. And so did everyone else watching. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this in the comments below. Have you ever faced someone who believed they could control what wasn't theirs, whether it's property, access, or just basic fairness in life? Where do you draw the line between letting things go and standing your ground? When does persistence become bullying, and when does defense become necessary? These situations stir strong feelings about justice, about power, about what we're willing to fight for when someone tries to take away our rights. Share your stories. Take a stand. Tell us how you've handled overreach in your own life, or what you think Richard should have done differently. The discussion matters. Your voice matters. Let's talk about it.